So this is going to be a short video just to talk about activities. Activities make up a fundamental part of a service request. Now, right from the beginning of these videos, we've actually been using activities. We've been using activities as part of a runbook. Now, when a new service request is created, if we create one, a default one. So when a new service request is created, if it doesn't contain any activities, then it operates a little bit like an incident in that the service request will just remain open until it's been assigned to someone or be marked as complete and then closed. However, this is not really the design of service requests. The design of a service request is to have activities, and there are a number of activities that can be assigned to a service request. Now, these activities are generally created within the template. So when we have a template for creating a new Active Directory user, we could break this down into a number of activities. The activities could be to create the user in Active Directory. Then another activity could be to physically issue a computer that's going to require some human intervention. Then another activity may be to issue some dictation software. Up until now, we've been using runbook activities, and these are activities that will go away and use Orchestrator to perform some kind of scripting outside of the service request. So the difference is when there's an activity included, the service request will automatically complete when all activities have been completed individually. And that differs from not having any activities where you have to manually complete the service request. So up until now, when we've been creating activities with our runbooks, once the runbook is completed, the service request itself automatically completes. Now, there are other types of activities, and you can also create your own from the base classes. And the one that we already know about is the runbook activity. And as I said, this is the activity that will prompt a runbook to happen. Now, you can have more than one runbook activity per service request, because you might want to put a manual process in between. So, for instance, the service request may create the new Active Directory user, but then we'll need a manual activity to find a physical computer to assign to that new Active Directory created user, and then we could have another runbook that would run afterwards that could set up properties on that computer account, for instance, to assign it to that Active Directory user. We have manual activities, and these are activities that within the sequence need to be marked as complete before we move on to the next activity. So in the example I just gave a moment ago, a manual activity could be to physically go and find a computer and assign it to a new member of staff, or it may be to issue some kind of equipment, or it may be an activity that cannot be automated, that requires some kind of configuration on an external piece of software to set them up as a user on a new CRM system, and we can't automate that, so that's required to be a manual activity. As you see, when you go into an activity, they have the usual title, description, and then each individual activity can be assigned to an implementer, and they're the person responsible for completing that activity. Activities can also have configuration items associated with them, and this is important because in an up and coming video we can continue on about selecting multiple users in the service portal and how we can manipulate activities to allow selection for more than 2 people in the portal. The other very important activity is a review activity, and a review activity is used for approval. So for instance, in our creating new Active Directory user scenario, we may have a scenario when HR are going to mark a new person as a director, and they need to be added to a very sensitive distribution group, one that maybe financial information gets sent up to, etc. So although HR have selected that, maybe we want to have an approval process to make sure that for a director level option that's been selected, someone else has to approve that. That may be the head of HR, it may be someone within the IT department. So we want to, you want to have these kind of approvals. Another good example of an approval would be a request to release a website. So we want to release a website, but IT, we can automate that process maybe through an API on our web filtering software, but we still want to approve that before it goes through. So we'd use an approval activity. We then have sequential and parallel activities. Now, sequential activities in themselves, all they do are a container for running other activities. So we can have activities within an activity. Now, If we have no other activities within a sequential activity, it will automatically complete. And this can be used to help us in another video about assigning multiple users in a service portal. We'll come back to that. But as to say, if you add activities within a sequential activity, then each of those activities have to be approved or completed, should I say, one at a time until they reach the end. And then when that's completed, this sequential activity becomes completed and it moves on to the next activity within the service request. There is a parallel activity. And again, this is an activity that hosts other activities. But the difference here is these activities that we add in here will all be started at the same time. So we may have a manual activity in here to find a physical computer. We may have another manual activity to distribute some dictation software. There may be an activity in here to assign a physical desk. Now within a parallel activity, these will all start at the same time, and so the people that are responsible for those different areas will all be able to complete their activities individually of each other. Then when all those activities are complete, the parallel activity itself becomes complete. And then finally we have a dependent activity. Now what a dependent activity does is it allows you to be dependent on other processes outside the service request. So for instance, as part of the service request, if there is a change management request, we can create a dependency on a change management request being completed as part of that activity. And we're probably not going to cover too much of this in these videos because that's kind of into the change management side of things. So as we go on through these videos, I wanted to kind of give this high level over activities because we are going to use activities in Orchestrator. So in some instances we may want to add activities dependent on conditions. So you know, we might not want to have an activity for issuing dictation software if in the service request the option for requires dictation wasn't checked. Also, we may want to dynamically add approval processes. So, you know, only if a director box is selected in the service request is the approval required. So these are going to be added dynamically. Also, we need to give notification to people. How do we assign the activities to individual people? And how do they get notified that they've got a process to carry out? Okay, there are a number of different ways to handle notification. We could use workflows, or we could use email notification within Orchestrator. So there's different ways we can handle this, and as we go through the next few videos we will deep dive into each of these different activities and give working examples.